see the sunshine, all the things I can see.
Every 7th of April, in Rwanda, we remember those that lost their lives in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. It has been 30 years since Rwanda started rebuilding. To different people, the 30th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi has a different meaning.
Kwibuka ku nshuro ya 30 bivuze ibintu bigari cyane cyangwa birebire cyane.
Kwibuka 30, it's a lot of hope.
Tutibagirwa ibikibi cyatubayeho nk'abanyarwanda.
Igihe cyose jenoside yakorewe abatutsi izibukwa.
Ubu ngubu bitewe n'ukuntu urubyiruko nyine ruba rukugenda rutinyuka kuko rushoboye, rugenda ruba ruri kuzamuka ibintu byabaye mbere ngo ntibizasubira ukundi.
For us, Rwandans, we need to come together, we need to support each other, but we need to do it with hope and with a very positive mind.
Aho tugeze turahakesha ubuyobozi bwiza bwaduhaye ayo mahirwe nk'abadamu n'abakobwa yo kugira amahirwe angana n'ay'abagabo.
Looking forward to a more united country, a more prosperous country.
Kwibuka 30 is, as we look back, not only to what has happened in 1994, but what we have achieved over the last 30 years, we also look in the future, project ourselves in the future and say, hope is allowed.
In 1994, Rwanda was torn apart by one of the darkest chapters in human history, the genocide against the Tutsi. But out of the ashes of tragedy, Rwanda rose with determination to rebuild and thrive. On today's episode, we focus on the key factors that contributed to Rwanda's economic growth and success over the years. "30 years ago, Rwanda lay in ruins, crippled by devastation, both economic and social. Infrastructure was in ruins, institutions were weakened, and human capital was severely depleted. However, the country embarked on a path of reconciliation, seeking stability and initiating bold economic reforms. Today, we delve into the depths of Rwanda's condition in 1994, setting the stage for its remarkable journey of resilience and renewal.
The situation at the time was really a difficult situation in the sense that we had lost more than 1 million people, and many of them were actually part of the intelligence. So we had lost this. We had 3 million people that had gone out of the country, actually flying away. All the infrastructure was destroyed. The civil servant at the time, 80% of the civil servant didn't have university level, so that less than secondary 6 level, 80% of the civil servant that we had at the time. Inflation was at 64%. Economic growth, actually the economy had, that was already stagnating before 94, again shrunk by 50% in 94. So that's the situation we had at the time, the economic situation. And, the impact was not only economic, but also social. And poverty was estimated at 78%. So it means that 4/5 of the population was living in poverty. We needed to restart everything from scratch. So everywhere you are looking, everything was a priority. It was difficult to say, I do one, I don't do the other. So what do you do in that case?
The key challenges, they can be looked at in two parts. One, social challenges, the other economic challenges, obviously. After 1994, we had a serious humanitarian crisis, so many refugees, displaced people, survivors who had lost their beloved ones, many who had committed genocide. Those were humongous social issues that had to be dealt with.
Rwanda has been undergoing several developmental phases, and this is since after the aftermath of the genocide against Tutsi back in 1994. It is not very easy to describe the starting point because everything was destroyed. Even the infrastructure was destroyed, government institution, administration, building, everything was destroyed. Actually, measuring that period was not so easy because it was very, very, very down, and actually the country, there was no hope even to recover the country.
In a nation stripped of everything, the question arises: where does the rebuilding process begin?
The very first thing I always tell people, the very first thing is people need to know that the following day they will still be alive. So security and peace comes even before the economy. You know? Because there's no economy when you don't have stability or peace or security. You can't even produce anything. So the second thing, once you've got security, basic services. People want schools, people want to be able to go to the doctor, to the hospital, at least. People need food. You know? So the day, once they say, I will still be alive tomorrow, what do I eat? What do I wear? So the basic services follow the security. To ensure that you get security, the very first thing was having a government. Put in place a government of national unity to foster unity and reconciliation.
So restating people in places where they can live, for those who are coming out of other countries to Rwanda, but also those who had gone out of the country in 1994, and ensuring that harmony of people was, I think, for me, the biggest challenge. Then the justice issues. Unity, reconciliation has been quite a journey for us and still is, but I think quite good progress. The idea of fostering reconciliation among Rwandans. So on the social front, those were real issues. But that goes also with other underlying socioeconomic aspects, like again access to schools, access to hospitals, access to clean drinking water, access to electricity. Basically, the genocide and the war added to the already poor state the country was, brought us several steps backwards. So trying to catch up, I think, has been quite a challenge for all of us Rwandans. But then on the economic aspect as well, infrastructure was destroyed for sure. Rebuilding roads, just connectivity, ensuring connectivity of the country, rebuilding roads, rebuilding schools, rebuilding hospitals, and then you add other key things like offices and industries. All those infrastructure activities are very costly for a country. But amazingly, all those things have been, there has been simultaneous tackling of all those aspects because they are all key. You can't progress in development without electricity. You can't progress without connectivity of roads. But you also want to invest in industries. We've seen efforts to renovate airports and now building new airports. That's also as well as important. You can't stay to the basics of infrastructure. You also need to invest into other things which create employment, industries. So I think Rwanda has been a unique case of huge economic, social challenges, but yet with, I think, with the commitment and the prioritization things can be possible as well. So those were the challenges. We've made big progress about those challenges, but for sure, given our vision, I think there's still a way.
Despite the wreckage, Rwanda's advancement over the years has been remarkable. Today, it stands as one of the fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa.
There's been significant progress of Rwanda's GDP in the last 30 years. That's from 1994 to 2024 now, where our GDP has moved from a level of 753 million US dollars in 1994 to a current level of about 14 billion US dollars in 2023. Those are the recent numbers. So that equates to about 19 times, multiplication of 19 times of GDP over the last 30 years, which is tremendous, which is big growth. And that level of GDP growth has been sustained by an annual growth of about 9%. That's, you could say, one of the highest growth rates in sub-Saharan Africa. And that average is a bit affected by the COVID years, where in some cases we had negative growth. So if you had removed that, that would even be a little more. As of now, the recent numbers we released, which were for 2023, the year 2023, the GDP growth was 8.2. So we see good recovery from the COVID years.
The economy has nothing to do with what we had in 95. It's a completely different economy. A completely different economy. So people, on average, are 7 times more productive. The income of a Rwandan, an average Rwandan, has increased 7 times. That's what I'm saying, over the last 30 years. So it's not, we are not even the same people anymore. We are not living at the same standards anymore. Just look at life expectancy. More than 10 years, we were like at 49 or 41, and we are at 67. So you increase over 30 years, you increase your life expectancy more than 20 years. These things don't happen. You know? These things normally don't happen. I would call it a miracle over the last 30 years, to say the truth. And it's not only that we had growth, we actually reduced poverty. When I started, I was telling you 4/5 of Rwandans were living under poverty. Yeah. In the latest figures we've got by the Institute of Statistics, it's not even the recent one, 16-17, we were at 38%. So we actually more than halved poverty. We more than halved poverty, the poverty levels. We reduced inequality at the same time. So you get growth, poverty reduction, reduction in inequality. It tells you the story. I think it tells you that this is not the same society anymore. This is not the same economy anymore.
Economic growth serves as an important tool for alleviating poverty and enhancing quality of life. Let's explore how this positive economic momentum has translated into tangible improvements in these crucial areas.
That could be seen in various indicators of well-being, which you could say in terms of access to basic services like electricity, water, education, but also when it comes to well-being in terms of poverty. So poverty levels pre-1994, post-1994, were in the ranges of 65 to 70% of Rwandans were poor then. And that kept dropping to the recent numbers which we had of 2017 when we last did the survey, which were about 38% poor. So that has reduced by a half. We are now doing another household survey to measure poverty. But also when you look at the other dimensions like access to water, access to electricity, access to water is now about 82% of Rwandans having access to clean drinking water, 61% having access to electricity. So those are key aspects of well-being. Education also has improved in terms of primary enrollment in the ranges of 85% over the last number of years, but also secondary, basically is significant and steady improvements in other well-being indicators.
The statistics underscore advancements across various well-being indicators. To delve deeper into how these improvements have impacted their day-to-day experiences, we engaged with several Rwandan citizens.
In 1994, I was still a child, but I was at an age where I could understand and remember. During that time and my age, what I witnessed was not something a child could have witnessed. It was a tough time, and seeing dead bodies was not something that a child should have experienced. I went through that period, and comparing it to now, there is a huge difference between where Rwanda was and where the country is today. Seeing dead bodies, seeing people dying, seeing children who lost their parents. I also lost my parents and grew up in a tough life. But by the God's grace and through having a good country with good leadership, I must say that looking back at the country's image then, it was tough to imagine that it could transform into the country that it is today. Have the people it has, have a clean city. It was tough. But as I grew older and saw how things were developing, we are in a good country, and it enables us to have hope.
If we start from the period after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, when Rwandans were liberated and how we found it, it was a country, but it did not have life. Firstly, blood had been shed, Rwandans had been killed, and for those who were returning back, they found nothing. The perpetrators had destroyed and taken everything. There was need to start rebuilding the country, following the directions that have been put in place by the new leadership. Trading started slowly, and we can all see the progress today. Looking back, an example is Nyarugenge Market. It has developed to a modern building compared to how trading used to take place. Since 1994, trading has evolved, adopted modern technology, all due to the good leadership.
Trading has evolved. An example is people who used to trade before had to go to neighboring countries like Uganda or Nairobi to buy the merchandise. You find that they were buying from other traders instead of going to the manufacturers directly. Now, they have direct access to the manufacturers, and a trader can travel from Ruhengeri. They no longer have to go to Uganda. They now have access. One can easily go to China, or they can travel to Dubai. The process to get the goods to Rwanda has eased.
The motorbike transport business, especially for women in Rwanda, has developed tremendously because in the past 30 years, after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, there were no female motorbike riders. Even a couple of years after that, it was a taboo, and if a woman was seen doing it, it was against the norms. But now, because of the positive progress, if a woman is seen doing it, it seems normal. Since I started the motorbike transport business, my life transformed in evident ways. I have personally achieved a lot. I cannot say everything that I have gained from it, but I am now in a position to help others compared to how I was when I was relying on help from other people.
Since then until now, I can say that on my end, I have hope that my family and my lineage will have a stable life, and if we are lucky, we can continue with the leadership that we have, because there is a big difference between the leadership that we have now and the one that we had before. We have a leadership that gives everyone an opportunity.
kwibuka ni amateka.
Remembering is part of our history,
abanyarwanda muri
history
rusange,
that defines Rwandans
umuryango
in
mugari
general.
w'abanyarwanda. Kwibuka
There has
iyo
been
hashize
great
imyaka 30
transformation from how things
imyaka ya
were
mbere
in the
dukurikije
past and now.
uko twabibonaga wenda njyewe
I
ntabwo nari
wasn't
ndiho
born
navutse
yet
nyuma y'icyo
when it
gihe,
happened, but I have
ariko
witnessed the
twagiye tubona
changes.
impinduka nyinshi. Hagiye habaho
There used to be
ingengabitekerezo
genocide ideologies,
ikagumya yaguka,
but the government
bamwe
has
barayisansibiriza
worked
abandi,
to sensitize the
ariko
people
hamwe na
and
leta y'ubumwe
led to
twagize
unity and
nziza,
reconciliation
yagiye
among
byose
the people.
idufasha, abantu
People are now
bariyunga,
working together
abahemukiranye
in the same
bariyunga,
spirit
leta
for the
ishyiraho gahunda
development
za leta
of the
zishinzwe
country.
ubwiyunge no kugira ngo abantu bumve ko bari mu mwuka umwe kandi w'iterambere ry'igihugu.
Indeed, the nation has made significant progress. We now break down step by step the tangible measures implemented, such as establishing institutions to foster economic growth.
And some of the things that we had to do, not in 95, but like in 97, we created this Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. It was created in 97. We had to create Rwanda Revenue Authority. In 97, 98, the Rwanda Revenue Authority started. In 2000, we created the Office of the Auditor General. And those years, we also created RIEPA, CAPMER to attract investors. In 2008, all these institutions, there were 8 of them that we transformed into the Rwanda Development Board. So putting in place the institutional setup was very important. When Rwanda Revenue started, in 95, we had 22 billion of tax revenue, and it represented 6% of GDP, I think. This year, last year at least, we had 100 times, more than 100 times that. So in 30 years, we multiplied revenue collections by putting in place Rwanda Revenue Authority. We multiplied it more than 100 times. Yeah? So this is the importance of the institutions. Yeah? I was giving the example of the Ministry of Finance, RDB, and the rest. All this is part. So the institutional setup is important in getting the economy on the right path. But we made also other decisions along the way. We wanted an open economy, liberalize the economy, trade with the rest of the world. That was very important also. Trading with the rest of the world. And remember, we joined quite a lot of communities. There was already the ECAS that we rejoined, but also the EAC, East African Community, that we joined. We made the decision around 2007. We have now been, since a few years, the champion of, I would say, the African continental free trade areas. So in terms of liberalizing and opening up to the rest of the world, this is a decision that you made quite early, in the early days. But opening up and liberalizing also means opening up the mindsets of people, the mind of people. So it's being open to new technology, adopting technology, adapting technology, And at the time we started, over the last 30 years, actually we had our ICT plans, ICT development plans that we used to call at the time Nikki 1, 2, 3. We started them quite early also in the process. Yeah? So it means already in the 2000, we were thinking about ICT and technology. Actually, in our Vision 2020 that we finalized in 2000, technology and ICT is one of the cross-cutting issues, saying it needs to serve every single sector.
The key factors driving change in development in the economy, I think one would say the deliberate openness of the country to other people to come in the country and invest in the country. Rwanda has been very deliberate at that, to attract foreign direct investment into the country with the LDB's initiatives and efforts. That is very important, but also the ease of doing business, not only for foreigners but also for Rwandans, I would say would also be a key factor, because the private sector is definitely the main engine of development and growth, and actually also the main source of employment. But you could also deliberate investments by the government to kickstart various sectors. We're talking about tourism. There have been deliberate investments to set up hotels across the country and then sell them to the private sector. So the government kickstarts some areas and then passes them on to the private sector to run them, which is generally the journey of development for a country like Rwanda should undertake. There are some sectors where it will be challenging to just for the private sector to come on its own. It needs the government to kickstart it. So openness and deliberate government investment and ease of doing business, to me, would be the main three drivers. But overall, obviously, security and peace. Nothing can progress well without stability. And I think for me, that's the foundation in terms of our journey.
Over the years, Rwanda has made significant progress, but the journey of rebuilding continues. During this period, the business age will focus on Rwanda's bold steps towards economic recovery. On our next episode, we will focus on how different sectors have recovered from the dark days as we remember.